AfD chairwoman Alice Weidel painted a clear and dramatic picture of the European Union in a conversation with the Financial Times. Her message is unambiguous. In her view, the EU is on the verge of collapse, and Germany must act quickly to save itself. Weidel spoke of a deadline of only 30 days before the Union could collapse from within. In her interview, she went far beyond general criticism and outlined a possible German exit from the EU, the so-called Dexit, as a realistic option if the AfD were to enter the federal government. At the same time, she sharply criticized leading European politicians and the German government, which she called a bullshit government. Weidel stated that, for her, the EU today is less an alliance of sovereign states and more a bureaucratic machine guided by figures like Ursula von der Leyen. In her view, their power is not based on democratic legitimacy, but on backroom deals, political intrigue, and the interests of a small elite. She even called von der Leyen corrupt and accused her of making decisions that betray citizens' trust. She was particularly critical of the multi-billion euro contracts with the pharmaceutical industry, which, according to her, were concluded without transparency and betrayed citizens' interests. At the same time, Weidel praised Brexit as the right step and made the UK a role model for Germany. In her view, the British exit shows that a sovereign course is necessary when EU institutions fail. She accused the EU of increasingly patronising its member states, limiting their sovereignty, and being guided by bureaucratic interests rather than prioritising citizens' security and welfare. Economically, Weidel painted a bleak picture. Germany is in a recession of negative 0.3% growth, while the global economy is growing by nearly 3%. The automotive industry, the heart of the German economy, is on the verge of collapse. She cited specific numbers. Porsche reported a 91% drop in profits. VW, Audi and Mercedes recorded declines between 30% and 40%, and 50,000 jobs have already been lost. The cause, she said, is not only the global situation, but largely the policies of the EU and the federal government. The ban on combustion engines from 2035, rising energy prices due to the shift away from nuclear energy and fossil fuels, and strict environmental regulations, according to Weidel, severely weaken Germany's competitiveness. Weidel sharply criticized the CDU. Under Angela Merkel, the party had adopted a green, left-leaning course, which Friedrich Merz continues. She called Merz contradictory. On one hand, he promises conservative values. On the other, he continues the green policies of his predecessors. According to Weidel, the AfD, by contrast, follows a clear line to keep Germany independent, sovereign, and economically strong. Another central theme of her interview was security policy. Weidel painted Brussels as a symbol of European failure. She criticized immigration policy, which she claimed had failed spectacularly, and pointed to rising crime in the Belgian capital. Indeed, an analysis shows that Brussels had a rate of 3.19 intentional homicides per 100,000 inhabitants in 2023, the second highest in the EU, while Belgium overall, with 1.38, was well above the EU average. Brussels Attorney General Julian Maynil also warned that 2025 could be a record year for gun violence. Already, 57 shootings have been registered, 20 of them since the beginning of summer. Weidel called the situation proof of a systemic crisis in the EU and argued that the Union is incapable of ensuring the safety of its citizens. citizen dissatisfaction was also in focus. According to Weidel, surveys show that 1/5 of Brussels residents feel unsafe in their own neighbourhoods, twice as many as the Belgian average. Citizens' initiatives are calling for a stronger police presence, but she believes these measures are not being implemented. Interior Minister Bernhard Quentin spoke of a systemic problem that could only be solved with a systemic response. For Weidel, this response is not in sight, and with each day, the danger of EU collapse grows. Weidel also directly attacked the German government. She criticised Merz for inconsistent policies, broken election promises, and foreign policy that jeopardizes Germany's security. She was particularly explicit about arms deliveries to Ukraine, arguing that they exacerbate the situation rather than resolve it. Germany, she said, becomes a target due to its role as a NATO hub in the conflict between Russia and the West. Weidel advocated diplomacy, negotiations, and a neutral stance in international conflicts instead. The government's domestic policy also came under fire. Weidel called the current coalition a bullshit government that became more unpopular in just 6 months than its predecessors. According to polls, 69% of Germans are dissatisfied with the Merz cabinet, and only 26% trust the Chancellor. Internal disputes, broken promises, and irresponsible economic and social policies have intensified public dissatisfaction. For Weidel, it is therefore necessary for Germany to regain control over its borders, economy, and sovereignty. Europe policy was another focus. Weidel praised Hungary under Viktor Orban as an example of sovereign border and security policy. She criticised the EU for punishing Hungary, even though, in her view, the country prioritises the safety of its citizens. For Weidel, this is proof that the EU primarily serves the interests of bureaucrats and a small elite, not its member states. In economic policy, Weidel emphasised that Germany urgently needs technological openness and market-based solutions. She called for the industry to be strengthened again to secure jobs and maintain competitiveness. According to her, high energy prices, bans on combustion engines, and lack of innovation support endanger the future of Germany as an industrial location. In foreign policy, Weidel criticised the German government for both stagnation and escalation. While other countries, such as the US, sought negotiations with Russia, Germany largely withdrew from diplomatic processes and instead decided on arms deliveries to conflict zones. Weidel argued that wars today must be resolved not on battlefields, but through diplomacy and smart negotiation. Russia, as a nuclear power, cannot be defeated militarily, and Germany must not put itself in a dangerous position. Weidel also criticised societal issues. She spoke of rising crime, declining living standards, and growing insecurity among citizens. Streets and cities, according to her, are no longer safe, and millions of migrants live at the expense of the social system, funded by taxpayers. For Weidel, the AfD is the only party consistently opposing arms deliveries and participation in external conflicts. Weidel drew a clear conclusion. Germany must regain its sovereignty, secure its borders, strengthen its economy, and regain control over political decisions. If the EU continues to fail, a Dexit must be seriously considered. In her view, massive protests in France and Amsterdam show that the EU is already under enormous pressure, and the collapse of the Union is unstoppable. The AfD leader warned that citizens have lost trust in the EU and its leadership. She cited the Pfizer affair as an example, which demonstrates declining confidence in Ursula von der Leyen and the EU. Despite numerous calls for resignation, von der Leyen remains in office, which, according to Weidel, underscores the Union's authoritarian tendencies. Weidel's message is therefore clear: Germany cannot wait until the EU finally collapses. Only through active sovereign policies can the country protect its interests. This concerns not only economic stability, but also security, social cohesion, and Germany's international role. Finally, Weidel emphasized that the AfD is the only party consistently representing Germany's interests, and that the current government is leading the country into a dangerous dead end. High taxes, economic insecurity, rising crime, and a lack of political vision make a course correction urgently necessary. Weidel's statements are explosive because they reflect the current political mood of many citizens, clearly show dissatisfaction with the government, and simultaneously fuel the debate about Germany's future within or outside the EU. Whether a Dexit can actually be implemented remains unclear, but the AfD uses this debate to support its political positions and outline a strategic agenda for the coming years. Overall, Alice Weidel paints a bleak picture of Germany and the EU. The Union is on the verge of collapse, governments are acting ineffectively, and citizens feel increasingly insecure. For her, time is short, and Germany must position itself in time to prevent harm to the country and its population.